All right, we're starting off the new year strong with a book haul. Have I read a single book yet this year? No. But in all fairness, I am pre-filming this and it's still to December, so I'm feeling okay. I'm reading books, just not my January selection. Anyway, let's just get straight into the book haul. I have taken the time to organize these loosely by genre, so I will put timestamps and chapters on the screen so that you can hopefully skip around to whatever you're interested in, or you can watch the whole video from start to finish if you want to hear about all the books that I hauled this month. The first book I'm going to start with is The Far Field by Madhuri Vijay, or VJ. I have not heard of this book before, and why was I interested in it? I don't recall at all. I almost wonder if this was a book that I picked off the shelf trying to make room for something else and forgot to put back on. I guess we'll find out. There was a bag sale, that's what happened, and so you had to fill a bag, so this may have accidentally ended up in my cart. But it's got a pretty cover and I'm gonna read it, so we'll see how it goes. The next book I got, I did intend to pick up. And by the way, these are literary fiction, if I did not say that. And that book is Man Gone Down by Michael Thomas. And it says it's a beautifully written, insightful, and devastating novel about a young black father of three in a biracial marriage trying to claim a piece of the American dream he has bargained on since youth. I really am fascinated by stories of people trying to sort of realize the American dream and discussions of what they feel like has gone wrong in their lives, so particularly interested in this story. And then the final book had me just because of the relation to a classic novel, and that is Black Ulysses. I know nothing about this book. It doesn't really tell you much about the book on the back, at least not much that helps make sense to me, but this is definitely related to the Odyssey by Homer, and yeah, I was intrigued. So on the back it says it's an incredible journey as seen through the eyes of the proud black slave Esteban, a journey towards the amazing and mysterious sense of grace which illuminates the darkest moments of the human condition. That just sounds like a bunch of pretty words intended to make you buy this book. But my understanding at this point, after doing some research, is that this is about an 8-year odyssey that this black Spanish slave went on with, I'm assuming, his slave captor. I don't know if this is going to be good or bad, and I think I actually might be allergic to this book, so we'll see how that reading experience goes. By the way, did I mention that the main reason I'm doing this book haul and putting it up right now is because I just want to get these books out of the bag and onto my shelf, so you're benefiting from it. All right, the next set of books I have are both travel narratives. This is a genre that I don't typically intentionally pick books from, but I've been starting to keep a little bit more of an eye out for, and this is thanks to National Geographic's 100 Greatest Adventure Novels. I think that's what the list is called. I checked that out a month or two ago, and one of the things that I noticed as I was looking through the list was that a lot of the books that I was very interested in reading were travel narratives. So I wrote down the name of a couple of them, and I've been keeping my eye out for those specific books as well as books just related to traveling in general. So I guess I want to be sort of an armchair traveler. I don't know. But one of the books that I picked up was off of that list, and that book is Kon-Tiki. And the back of this book kind of makes it sound like a really interesting literature read, and I think that's because it's put out as an enriched classic. But the inside flap actually, I feel like, gives more of the description that National Geographic had, which was what drew me into wanting to read this book. And so basically, this guy went on a trip from the Pacific coast of South America to Polynesia on basically a raft. Because as part of his experiment, he wanted to prove that ancient civilizations could have actually made that trip. Now, I have heard since he did this experiment, there have been a lot more up-to-date thoughts on that subject. So I think that's a whole different story about whether or not his experiment, proved anything or not. But I was interested just in the story itself because he built a raft and then with his couple of people actually went on this trip. So whether or not ancient people could do it or not, this book is about him doing it or not. So it should be a fascinating read. And definitely not a trip I want to go on, but one that I want to hear about somebody else doing. And then not from that list, I don't think, but maybe from another YouTuber, I heard about Graham Greene's Travels with My Aunt. It talks about how he joins a shiftless twilight society mixing with hippies, war criminals, CIA men, people smoking once illegal substances but no longer illegal substances that YouTube may still flag me for saying, breaking all the currency regulations and coming alive after a dull suburban lifetime. So apparently Graham Greene needed to actually go traveling Europe with his aunt in order to actually fully come alive. And that sounds fascinating because his aunt, at least from what I've read, seems like a very normal person, but ends up getting him in very not expected situations. We'll see. I bought a couple of historical fictions, and the first one is Solovyev and Larionov. That is like a tongue twister. And the reason this caught my attention is because the very first thing on the back is a question, and it's, can we ever really understand the present without first understanding the past? And it explores the idea of what really happened to General Larionov of the Imperial Russian Army, who somehow avoided execution by the Bolsheviks. He lived out his long life in Yalta, leaving behind a vast heritage of undiscovered memoirs, which I feel like if you're talking about the memoirs doesn't mean they've been discovered. And in modern-day Russia, a young student is determined to find out the truth about what happened to this guy. So I don't know if you're going to get two timelines, one of following the general and reading the memoirs or something like that, and the other one of, the student in modern-day Russia trying to follow him. But either way, it sounds like a very fascinating setup to explore history. The other historical fiction that I purchased was Sacred Hunger. This is a book that I want to read as part of my Booker project, where after doing a video on the Booker Prize, I realized that a lot of the Booker books that I like are actually a combination of the shortlisted books and as well as the winner. This was actually a winner of the Booker Prize, I think in 1992. And it's definitely one of the ones that even if it was just on the shortlist, I'd want to read. Sounds really fascinating. It's like a semi-sea voyage, adventure, slave trade, utopian historical fiction. What's not to like about that? I think this is another book that I picked up based on the question that the book poses and attempts to answer. That book is Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. It says it's a novel. This is very confusing to me. If I read the back of this, it sounds more like a nonfiction philosophical work, but it is a novel. It was categorized in the fiction section. So I'm assuming there's some type of story, but that I ask a lot of philosophical questions. I don't know how this is going to work out as a novel, but it's the 25th anniversary edition. So apparently somebody and some buddies really like this book. So I'm interested to give it a shot and see what he has to say. I picked up two short story collections. So the first book that I picked up is Cain by Jean Toomer, and this was published in 1923, but it is her surrealistic sketches of Southern rural and urban life in the U.S. And it apparently depicts the northern world as the harsher reality of asphalt streets and the southern world as sort of more the rural countryside. So this should be a pretty interesting book to read, especially because the other short story collection that I have is also based in the South in the US, and that is the collected stories of Eudora Weltley. I believe I have read a couple of her short stories before, though for the life of me, I can't recall which ones. This book is a collection of short stories about her time living in Mississippi and just Mississippi and the South in the US in general. So you can kind of see how these two very different books, I am sure, from two very different perspectives, and I'll be interested to compare their short stories. Okay, moving on to classics. I bought two works that are both considered classics that also fall more on the historical fiction or the historic side of things. The first book is The Bridge of San Luis Rey. It is actually a winner of the Pulitzer Prize. And interestingly enough, it's not the fact that it won the Pulitzer Prize that made me want to read this. I actually blame this purchase on music. So I've been working my way through a book called The Year of Wonder, which is one piece of classical music a day. And one of the pieces of music in there is actually inspired and named after this book. And it shared a line from this book that was so beautiful to read while listening to that song that I decided I wanted to read the entire book, regardless of what it was about, so that I could read the book while listening to the entire piece. This book is about a actual historical tragedy that happened in Peru, and in this fictionalized account of it, there is a monk who sees the tragedy happens, and he tries to explain to himself as well as those around him that this act was actually divine intervention. So it's definitely tackles a theme that actually kind of reminds me of Candide and that idea of optimism that comes up in that book. So I'm going to be extra interested in reading this because I just recently read Candide. The other historical classic I have is The Return of the Soldier by Rebecca West. She wrote this book before World War I and before ever having experienced war in her lifetime. That is also the case, I believe, of the people in this book, and it covers the story out in the countryside of a family whose son, I believe, has come home and is experiencing shell shock. And it is just, instead of what goes on in the city during the war, it's sort of a war story at home in the country and the after effects of that. It sounds like it's going to be rather a quiet, short little story, and I'm really interested to read this one. I felt like this was a good time to buy a book to continue a series, so I picked up Dr. Thorn in My Side, because that's what this feels like it might end up being. Hopefully it won't. Anyway, Dr. Thorn is the third book in the Chronicles of Barsetshire, and we'll see how it goes. If you watched my December weekly reading wrap-ups, you'll know I read Barchester Towers, and that didn't go so great. I've heard mixed things about this book that make me have mixed feelings about it. I have heard that some people like Dr. Thorn less, which is making me hope that I'll like it more, and I've heard vice versa. So no clue. I know it's one of his more popular books, but so is Barchester Towers. And some people have told me, nope, the politics continue in this one. Some of them told me it's more about the drama. I don't know what to believe, so I'm gonna give it a try. Did I say that I was going to get it out of the library and this, that, and the other thing? Yes, but the sale made it less than $1, so it's not getting cheaper than that, and I lied and told myself that maybe if I annotate it, it'll help me get through the book and I'll enjoy it more. Continuing with the classics, I found this work of Russian literature, which is Antonina by Evgenia Tor. And there's a couple of things that interested me about this book, but specifically two facts that it mentions on the back, which is that it's patterned after the successful contemporary novels of the Bronte sisters, and it was also praised by Ivan Turgenev. So that is very intriguing right there alone. Like, one, that it's fashioned after the Bronte sisters. Let's see who does it better. And also that another great Russian literature novelist praised this work. I have not heard of this before, and interestingly enough, this is apparently a untranslated section of a 4-volume novel. Where the rest of that novel is, I don't know. And I looked it up, and I don't even know that the rest of that novel's ever been translated. But this is the part that I get. And I'm assuming, since it's been printed as such, that it will stand alone as its own work. So we'll see how that goes. I did pick up two classics that are both considered Gothic fiction, and one of them I had heard of, and the other one not. The first one is Vathic, and this is by William Beckford. And this is one of those books that I'm like, what is this about to be about? So it says, the Caliph Vathic is dissolute and devout and hungry for knowledge. When the mysterious Gaor offers him boundless treasure and unrivaled power, he is willing to sacrifice his god, the lives of innocent children, and his own soul to satisfy his obsession. So am I hoping that this is secretly a selling your soul to the devil kind of theme? Yes, I am. Because I feel like it's a theme that's often promised in classics and not frequently delivered. I'm looking at you, Dorian Gray. And like, I'm not even looking for it to be a literal selling of its soul to like an actual like pitchfork holding devil, but just something that's closer to a like actual antagonist, like truly convincing you to like somehow dispossess yourself, if that makes sense. The other work of Gothic fiction that I purchased is Edgar Huntley. This is one that I had never heard of, but is put out by Broadview Publishers, which I am starting to recognize as being a publisher that puts out at least unusual classics. So I'm just going to read to you what the back says this book is about. Edgar Huntley is a compelling tale of sleepwalking, murder, and frontier violence set in rural Pennsylvania in the 1780s. Do you need to know anything else? I don't. And the final 3 books I have are all written by the same author, because sometimes you want to read the works of theirs that you know, and sometimes you want to read the other works of theirs that you've never heard of but sound equally intriguing. Intriguing is the word of the day, apparently. The first book that I have is The Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I feel like this is the well-known one. Memorable heroes and villains throughout literature can seem oddly similar, but there is only one with a wooden leg and a parrot. Long John Silver. Love it. The other 2 books I picked up by Robert Louis Stevenson are The Story of a Life, that when I read the inside flap also apparently ends with his book called The Body Snatcher. Interesting. So The Story of a Life is a lesson in life encompassing art, alcohol, and deceit in all its forms, and is presented here alongside Stevenson's short story The Body Snatcher, a macabre tale of human corruption. So he seems to really be on this idea of human corruption, and just deceit seems to also be another major theme in his book, which I find really fascinating, and is a theme that I also found repeated in the final book I picked up by him, which is The Wrong Box. Now this says Robert Louis Stevenson and Lloyd Osbourne. I'm not sure how Lloyd Osbourne comes into this, but I'm hoping somewhere in the reading of this it will be explained. And this says Maurice and John Finsbury are victims of eccentric Uncle Joseph's mismanagement of their trust fund. Oh, trust fund babies, but now there's no trust fund. In an effort to regain what is rightly theirs, the nephews watch over their aged uncle so he can live long enough to inherit a fortune they expect to acquire. I love a good story about like inheritance gone wrong or stolen or not given or something along that lines, because like what a horrible time to live, where like whether or not you do well is almost completely dependent on inheriting money. I mean, in some ways life is still like that, but all the much more so during this time. And I'm wondering, is this like the wrong cash box? Does somebody pick up the wrong bank deposit box? Like, where's the wrong box coming? I didn't read enough of the back to find out. There's a whole bunch more written on there, but sometimes they get into spoilers and I wasn't here for it. All right, that is the list of all the books that I hauled. Let me see if I can hold up this stack for you. It would have worked better if I had stacked them neatly, but I didn't. So here you go. Ta-da! Oh. Anyway, let me know if you're interested in reading any of these books, if you've read any of these books, if you own any of these books, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!